We're getting near to the end of this title. In this last chapter, it's about injecting content or controlling content from above. We're going to start from something relatively simple and very fun, which is clipping and basically containing elements, making sure that only what we want of an element will be visible at any given time. From one level of clipping where we're actually cutting it and masking it to just hiding the information, making it scrollable or not. But then this lecture, you'll know how to do both. So let's jump right into it. We're in site number 4 right now, so just make sure that you have it. And really all I did is took the sample that we had before and made this paragraph have no formatting. So it's basically scrolling all the way through. What I wanted to talk about is about masks in general, and we're going to be talking about two properties, the overflow property and the clip property. Now you could use them both for images and for text. So we're going to focus on text because that's a less commonly used way of working with these type of manipulations. So I'm going to go ahead into my source files, searching for that paragraph. And I'm going to search for my multi-paragraph because that is the paragraph that doesn't have basically wrap anymore. The white space is no wrap. And I'm going to go ahead and add to it overflow and set that to be hidden. By setting the overflow to be hidden, and by the way, the default is visible, by setting it to be hidden, I'm basically getting rid of anything that goes out of the bounds of the box of our paragraph. And that bounds is defined by our paragraph that we created earlier where we set our width and height. There was a minimum width, a minimum, and so on and so forth. So if I go ahead here and I just click on refresh and I go ahead and refresh my item, we'll see that now the paragraph is getting cut off and there's no way for us to see the remainder of the text. It's completely invisible. No way to scroll, nothing of the sort, which leads me to the next way of working with it is instead of setting it to be hidden, setting it to be scroll. Now, when we set it to scroll, basically what will happen is by default, the browser, based on whatever scrolling mechanism it has, would add a scrolling mechanism to it. In some browsers, such as this one, it's invisible unless you roll over it and start moving around, and then you'll have access to your scroll bar. But in general, even if you don't see it, the content itself would be scrollable with your mouse, or if you dragged along the copy itself would then move around with you. So that's more or less the features of overflow. There's one more which is called auto, which I would avoid basically, which basically lets the browser itself decide what to do. We don't like giving the browser that type of decisions. We want to control our design. But in this case, if we set the overflow to be automatic, in this case, what would happen is basically we would get a scroll bar because the browser would be smart enough to know that not all of the content is visible and it would set it automatically. But in general, we would avoid auto. I would pick it manually. Our default, as we said, was visible. So let's move on to another topic and kind of a relatable content topic. What happens if you want to basically mask content or basically clip out content? And as the name implies, clipping is, there's a property called clip. Now, this only works with if your positioning is absolute or fixed. Does not work with relative pathing. Now, in this case, in our footer is positioned in that way. So I'm going to go ahead and clip it. Now, clipping works very simply. Since CSS 2.1, the only valid shape is rectangle, but they're expected to add more, or we hope that more will be added in CSS 3 and beyond. So right now there's only a rectangle, but we're more or less, this design is preparing us for the future where there might be circles and other types of shapes. The rectangle accepts 4 parameters, the top, right, bottom, and left for positioning. I'm going to go ahead and just set the values because I already pre-configured the values that I want there. 53 and 20 pixels. So if I go ahead here and just click on refresh, we'll see that now our footer is going to be floating and it's going to be cropped in that specific position. So our footer is not as overwhelming maybe even. And if I go and inspect my footer, we'll see that in my footer itself, we could play around with those properties, or if 20 controls the top and I reduce that number, it would go up until the top of the property. It doesn't really matter. Minus, in this case, there's nothing there, so it wouldn't really affect anything. So if we could go up and down with it, 20 set it in that position. The second parameter, as you can see, is controlling the side, the third parameter controls the bottom, the last parameter controls the beginning point, and really if you read a technical document, it's going to tell you that it's going to be the top, right, bottom, left, but just go ahead and play with it and find the configuration that looks best for you. That's the easiest thing to do when it comes to clipping. One thing that you might do by mistake is if you put the numbers in correctly, you just won't see anything. So start from really big values. Start from a 0 here and not 0 on this end, but a really large number on the second parameter, and a really large number in the third parameter, and a small number in the last parameter, and then play around with the parameters until you find exactly the bounds that you want, which is exactly what I did.